Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are strapping in for a pretty intense ride back. We're looking at the crash of 1929.
Probably the biggest market event of the 20th century, yeah.
Absolutely. And the immediate aftermath. Well, it was staggering, wasn't it? The whole world just watched as Wall Street went into this free fall.
For months, too. It wasn't just one bad day. Wiped out fortunes, kicked off the Great Depression. It changed everything.
It really did reshape global governance.
And, when we talk about 1929, often it's the numbers that dominate the story.
Right. The percentages, the points lost.
Exactly. But the source material we're diving into today is this incredibly detailed, very human account. It shows this wasn't just like an economic oopsie. It was a psychological collapse. So the mission for you, the listener, is to really pull back the curtain on this. It's a story about power, about psychology.
And that recurring dangerous idea.
That this time is different.
Yeah.
That illusion.
That distinction feels really important. We're trying to go beyond just the flashing ticker takes, to uncover the drama. The source calls it a story of visionaries and fraudsters, titans and dreamers.
People who genuinely thought they'd cracked the code, mastered the market.
Only to be completely swallowed by it. A calamity almost beyond their understanding.
And that's why this history feels like such a crucial blueprint for today, doesn't it?
It really does. So let's unpack that human drama first. That seems key to why this account is so gripping.
Yeah.
The source material really leans into this unique narrative style. It calls the crash a people's tragedy told through the lens of the leading players, their personalities, families, friends.
It makes it personal, not abstract. It's a character study, fundamentally.
Absolutely.
And the narrative really shines because it avoids those simple labels, good guys, bad guys.
Right. It's more complex.
Totally. The key figures, described as a rich cast of unforgettable characters. But the source, it resists painting them as just heroes or villains.
They were what? Flawed people.
Flawed people lost in a calamity. That's the phrase used.
Okay, so we need some names here. Give us a couple examples of these flawed people.
Well, think of Charles Mitchell, president of National City Bank.
Okay.
They called him the man who broke the bank and the nation. Maybe a bit harsh, but
Sounds pretty damning.
he was a titan, absolutely. Symbolized that really aggressive, expansive banking of the era, pushing investment trusts, stock distribution, just full speed ahead.
So his ambition kind of fueled the boom.
Definitely. But his downfall also showed the structural weaknesses, maybe even corruption. Then you've got someone completely different, like Jesse Livermore.
The speculator, right. Legendary figure.
Yeah, the ultimate gambler, maybe. He sort of represented the common person's dream, just amplified like crazy. Made and lost fortunes several times. Famously made huge money during the crash itself, betting against the market.
Wow, so you have the sort of the architects like Mitchell building the financial structure.
Right, the perceived visionary.
And then the drivers of euphoria, like Livermore, convincing the little guy, hey, you can get rich too.
Precisely. And all this human drama played out against this backdrop of the source calls it a raging battle between Wall Street and Washington.
Ah, okay, that tension.
Yeah, the sources really highlight that. You had Hoover and Washington kind of conflicted, trying to maybe tap the brakes gently.
Trying to signal caution.
Yeah, but Wall Street, led by guys like Mitchell, was basically telling the government, stay out of our business, we've got this.
What's interesting, though, is that Washington wasn't totally oblivious, right? They saw the speculation.
Oh, they saw it, especially the credit explosion, people buying stocks on margin, sometimes putting down barely anything.
So if it's framed as a battle, what was driving Wall Street to push back so hard against any kind of regulation or even caution? What was the psychology there?
Well, ego, partly, but also this fundamental, almost religious belief in perpetual growth.
Okay.
The sources argue it wasn't just about bad rules or lack of rules. It was the delusion, myopia, and greed that really defined the endless boom mentality.
Myopia, meaning they just couldn't see past the next profit report.
Pretty much. And the delusion was this shared belief that they'd actually changed the rules of economics, that cycles were a thing of the past.
Let's maybe nail down that delusion for the listener. What were the mechanisms that made the risk feel like, it wasn't there for the average person jumping in?
Two big things stand out. Margin buying, as you mentioned.
Right.
You only needed, say, 10% of the stock's price in cash. Your broker lent you the rest.
So huge leverage.
Immense leverage. It poured fuel on the fire. And second, these things called investment trusts.
Okay, what were those?
They were sold as these safe, diversified baskets of stocks, like early mutual funds, sort of, often run by the big banks.
Sounds sensible on the surface.
Yeah, but the problem was the banks often used them to basically sell their own, sometimes inflated stocks back to the public.
Yeah.
It created this feedback loop. Cash chasing confidence, confidence chasing cash. Highly unstable.
That structure. Leveraging debt like that to fuel the speculation.
Yeah.
It almost makes the crash feel less like a surprise and more like, I don't know, an inevitability once the confidence finally cracked.
It really does. It shows how human failings, greed, overconfidence, fear were just magnified by this structure of euphoria and, crucially, debt.
Okay, so untangling all of that, the greed, the credit, the psychology, that takes some serious historical detective work.
Absolutely.
Let's shift gears a bit and talk about how this history was actually put together. The account is praised as true scholarship.
It really is. Apparently, it was 8 years of research.
8 years, wow.
And the goal wasn't just reporting facts. It was about creating almost an emotional reality. To do that, the historian had to go way beyond the official documents.
Become a detective of the everyday stuff, almost.
Exactly. That's what's so impressive. They dug into personal correspondence and unpublished papers, weaving them into the narrative for the first time.
If you had to guess, what kind of material do you think was most powerful for capturing the actual mood of that time? Diaries, letters.
The sources mention exactly that private diaries, letters, even marginal notes on documents. What's really special about that level of forensic detail
Yeah.
is it lets the historian reconstruct how key people experience the unfolding disaster. Not just the big names, but their spouses, their staff, feeling the ructions almost hour by hour.
So it's the difference between reading market plummets in a newspaper headline
Right.
and reading a private letter saying, Charles came home white as a sheet, insisting it's temporary, but he hasn't slept, that kind of thing.
Exactly that. It creates emotional proximity, makes these events from nearly a century ago feel immediate, recent almost.
Wow. And they use other unusual sources too, right? Like
Yeah.
weather reports,
Right.
architectural records.
Yeah, apparently so. Consulting old weather reports to know if it was foggy when someone got terrible news, or architectural records to describe the specific banking hall.
That's meticulous.
It really grounds the abstract fear in a physical time and place. You can almost picture them there.
It's riveting, that level of detail. But the sources we looked at also raise a potential critique, a slight downside to that immersive approach.
Ah, right, the wealth aspect.
Yeah, the sheer volume of astonishing detail about the extreme wealth, the elegant mansions and champagne yachts. The criticism is that it can sometimes give the narrative what was the phrase? A prurient character.
That's a really interesting point. Prurient meaning, like, the author might be lingering a bit too much on the excessive luxury, almost enjoying describing it, even while condemning the era.
Right, like walking a fine line.
It's a tough balance for a historian, isn't it?
Yeah.
You need to show the extravagance that fueled the whole thing, the moral dimension, but you risk making the reader, I don't know, a voyeur of extreme wealth.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the sources agree the scholarship itself, the depth, and the craft are really admirable, despite that potential tension in the narrative.
Okay, so here's where it gets really, really relevant for us now, connecting it to today. Given all that incredible forensic detail the author assembled, what specific modern parallels do the sources draw? What should we be looking out for?
Well, the parallel is described as stark, almost chilling. The source says the dizzying highs and the brutal lows of 1929 eerily mirror our present.
In what ways, specifically?
It explicitly points to today's world where markets soar, political tensions mount, and the fight over financial influence plays out once again. So
Right.
it's that combination, high-flying, maybe speculative markets, plus deep political division, and fights over who controls the financial levers.
Okay, so the big lesson then becomes about those ignored warnings.
Yeah.
The source mentions disregarded alarm bells. What were they, specifically? Saying skeptics were dismissed is one thing, but what were they actually saying back then?
They were mostly screaming about the fundamentals. Basic stuff,
Like what?
like dividend yields being historically low, price-to-earnings ratios just going into the stratosphere, defying any kind of logic. They were warning about the sheer amount of margin debt. Millions of ordinary people essentially gambling with borrowed money, betting it all on prices only going up.
But nobody wanted to hear it?
No. In the late 20s, if you suggested caution, you were basically called un-American, a pessimist, a spoilsport. So they were dismissed until it was too late. The collective delusion was just too strong. The belief that the old rules were gone.
So the core takeaway for you, the listener, is that this history works like a crucial blueprint. That's the term used.
Yeah, blueprint for understanding these cycles of speculation and the deeper forces that drive financial upheaval.
So we can maybe recognize those alarm bells next time they start ringing.
That's the hope. That's the goal. But, connecting this to the bigger picture, it's important to remember the outcome wasn't all destruction.
Right. The aftermath forced changes.
Huge changes. The sheer scale of the 1929 disaster forced this massive political and regulatory reckoning.
A lot of the institutions we still rely on today were basically forged in that fire, weren't they?
Absolutely. The source mentions that many of the institutions and ideas that we still turn to in moments of crisis came directly out of that catastrophe. Think about the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Regulating the markets.
Exactly. And changes to the Federal Reserve's role, deposit insurance like the FDIC. It forced accountability and structure onto what was basically the Wild West in the 1920s financial world.
That's a really good synthesis. So 1929, not just a market blip, a human disaster, a political earthquake driven by flawed people and really dangerous financial tools, which ultimately led to profound institutional change.
Yeah, that sums it up well. And look, if you're listening and want to dive even deeper into this specific era, our sources suggest a couple of other excellent books.
Okay, great. What are they?
For really solid foundational understanding, the mechanics, the personalities, you really can't beat the classic. The Great Crash, 1929 by John Kenneth Galbraith. It's considered, essential reading.
A cornerstone text. And the other?
If you're looking for something that maybe breaks down the complex economics and market stuff for more of a general audience, another recommendation is A History of the United States in 5 Crashes by Scott Nations. Apparently, it's very good at explaining volatility clearly.
Good suggestions, thanks.
But ultimately, that enduring warning from the 1929 story comes back to that phrase, the danger of falling for the seductive illusion that this time is different.
Right.
So given the patterns we've talked about, the soaring markets, maybe fueled by debt, the political tensions, the fights over financial power, here's the final thought, the question the blueprint poses.
Yeah.
What specific area of today's world, today's markets, today's political fights might historians say 90 years from now look back on and identify as the disregarded alarm bell that we are ignoring right now?
Wow. That is, that's a vital and pretty heavy question to leave you with. Definitely something to think about.
It puts the blueprint into action, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Okay, we'll leave it there for this discussion. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.